Hi, this is Joel Johnson with Johnson Brunetti. Today, we're going to talk about designating your beneficiaries, how to handle assets, and we're going to talk to you who may be the beneficiaries. What to do, such a dicey subject. Hey, before we get into this, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so you get notified anytime we upload new retirement planning content. We're constantly uploading new content. We've got all kinds of links to different information, so make sure you subscribe to this channel. So let's talk about assets. Let's talk about wealth. Whatever wealth means to you. It could mean a few $100,000 that you want to leave to your kids. It could mean millions and millions of dollars. It doesn't matter. It's your assets. It's anything you might leave to the kids. And we get into this thing of, how do I talk to the kids? What do I tell them? When do I tell them? What is their responsibility, and so on? Wendy and I, my wife Wendy, have 4 boys. And we're having to deal with that right now. We had to deal with it 3 years ago when we shared information with them. Our financial picture has changed, and we've changed our estate plan, and so we have additional conversations we need to have with the children. So I'm going to talk about my situation a little bit just to give you an example and also get you thinking on how you should handle this with your children. And those of you that are adult children, what you should be looking for and maybe how to help your parents. Not to tell them what to do, but to make sure that you address your concerns and your feelings with your parents. Now, what Wendy and I have done might not be the right thing for you. I in no way seem to suggest that that is the case. You need to figure out what's right for you and for your family. So, estate planning. When should I tell my children? And what should I tell them? How much? There are all kinds of different philosophies on this. My opinion is when your kids are younger, like junior high and high school age, I don't think they need to know specific numbers. And I'm not sure you want to get into a deep conversation of, hey, when mom and I die, yada, 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 because that's a little traumatic for somebody that's in middle school or high school. I think it's okay if they know that you're well off. We've certainly told our children that we're well off. Now, we weren't when my oldest boy was growing up in elementary school and also in junior high and a little bit in high school. We weren't in the same financial position that we are today, so we didn't have a lot of those conversations. But when our younger 3 boys were growing up, they sort of knew that, and we let them know we're really blessed. We've got a good amount of money. We don't have to worry about money like we did 10 years ago, and so we let them know that, but we didn't get into specifics. I would say the when in this situation is when they become to the point where they understand money. It's probably not when they're in college. It's probably after they've been in the workforce for a little bit. Again, our youngest has been in the workforce he worked all his way through college because he chose to and we thought it was a good idea, but now he's been in the workforce for a year. Our oldest is 32. He's been in the workforce for obviously more than 10 years after he graduated from college. So they've been in the workforce, they understand money. We are opening up more and more to our kids about specific amounts of money. So I think when you want to get really detailed is when they understand money, when they've earned their own money. I think it's really, really important that they understand money a little bit before you get into details. What should you tell your kids? We've pretty much told our kids everything except for specific amounts, but we've given them ranges so that they understand the amount of money that we've saved, and they certainly understand that we're not going to spend all our money before Wendy and I pass away. So they've got some kind of an indication of the gravity of the situation. They understand the significance of the wealth. They also understand that we do not plan to leave them so they don't have to work, and I'll get into that in just a few minutes. But I think when is when you think their financial responsibility or when you think they are financially responsible, and the what is, be as open as you feel comfortable with. But I would begin to introduce amounts of money. So that's when to start the conversation. Now, I think another thing that you want to think about before we get to what your kids, so I'm going to talk about you that are the adult children in just a minute, but I'm still talking to the parents here. I think another thing that you want to think about is not only where do you start, But do you want to bring in other people to this conversation? Do you have a trustee? Do you have somebody that you're going to trust as part of the family who's the go-to person? So for our kids, again, they're not the trustee, they're not inheriting money directly, so they know who that go-to law firm is, and they know who that go-to person is that's going to fulfill our wishes. I think they should know that. I think they should know, number one, who you've chosen, because it does say something about your values, who you've chosen, whether that's a relative, a family member, maybe it's a bank or a trust company. So I think they should know who that go-to person is. But again, not just because it's going to express your values, who that go-to person is, especially if it's one of their uncles and aunts or something like that. But it's also going to let them know if something happened to mom and dad, that it's important that they know who to call absolutely first. Now, let's talk about the adult children for a minute. So, what is your responsibility? Those of you that are adult children that are going to inherit any money or houses or anything, even if it's not a huge amount, even if it's not millions and millions of dollars, you have some responsibilities. This is family wealth. And although it's funny, I heard Shaq O'Neal give a speech once, and he said, I went to my kids and I said to them, I'm rich and you're not. And I thought it was kind of funny because he was trying to stress to his kids that, you know, this is me and your mom's money, this isn't your money, but at some point it will become, or you will have some kind of access to the parents' money, and you need to understand that you are responsible for certain things. And I think the most important thing that you're responsible for is understanding approximately how much money there is, but more importantly, understanding your mom and dad's wishes. What are their wishes? What are their values? This is going to sound like I'm preaching, but I think you as adult children that are going to inherit money someday have a ethical and a moral responsibility. And again, this is my opinion, so don't take this the wrong way, but I think you have an ethical and a moral responsibility to have the legacy of your parents' values expressed in the way that you spend their money. And again, maybe you're offended by that, maybe you think I'm preaching to you, but it's something that Wendy and I have discussed. We came up, we worked very hard, we started with nothing. I remember sitting on the steps of our first apartment, trying to decide whether we had enough money to go out to dinner that weekend. And that's where we came up, and we want our kids to understand those values. Now, that's okay if your parents aren't like that, but understand your parents' values. I think that's a very, very deep responsibility. Now, typically, one of you, if you're adult, if you have siblings, is listed as somehow maybe the trustee of a trust, maybe you're the executor of the will or something like that. That's a very serious responsibility, and you need to understand, you know, what does that mean? If you're a trustee, that means you're responsible for carrying out the wishes that your parents had in that trust. A trust is simply a document. Think of it as a rule book. They've written the rules of how money can be divvied up and how it can be spent and how it can't be spent. But the trustee is responsible for following those rules. And that's a very, very big responsibility, not only from a legal standpoint, because you're a fiduciary for the other beneficiaries, but also just that your parents have trusted you for that. Also, are you a power of attorney? POA means power of attorney. So in my mom and dad's case, I was the power of attorney for financial things. That means I had the right to sign their name, I had the right to make financial decisions and so on, even while they were alive. And my brother, Jamie, was the power of attorney for health care decisions. That's a very serious responsibility. So that doesn't mean you're a trustee or an executor. Power of attorney is very different. Typically, it's done when your parents are still alive, and you've got a big responsibility to, again, make those decisions. Why is it important that one person in a family has a power of attorney? It's very hard for all siblings to agree on everything, and especially when it comes to a situation like medical care. There might be different feelings. Family members might argue about a medical treatment or maybe a lack of treatment or something where you decide not to treat a certain illness, like we had to with my mom. It was very sad. She had a brain tumor, and we had to decide what type of interventions to take. It's much better if that is given to one person. So if you are the person that's been given that medical power of attorney, it's not only a vote of confidence that your parents gave you, but it's a very, very serious responsibility. And you're the one that needs to make that decision, obviously keeping in account your siblings and so on, but you making that decision. So are you a power of attorney? Are you a trustee? What's your responsibility? This is part of your family duty to be involved in this, not to just sit back. And, you know, we have the 4 boys, and a couple of them are like, I don't care, Mom and Dad. No, we've got to pull them into this conversation, because when our opinion is, when we've been blessed with the kind of finances that we have, that is a responsibility that we have and that they have to understand our values. Let me just say one other thing about charitable giving. Wendy and I believe that, again, because of the way we were brought up, blue-collar families and so on, that we have a responsibility to give quite a bit of money away to support causes, whether they're social causes, whether they're religious causes, and so on. And so that needs to be something where if your parents, I'm talking again to you adult children, if your parents feel that that's important, maybe you should think about that when it comes to your inheritance. How can you get involved in that? And it's so important that you have these conversations while your mom and dad are still able to have these conversations. Last but not least, let's say mom and dad are gone and now you have your inheritance, or they've gifted it to you before they've passed on. What is your responsibility? Well, in a sense, it does change a little bit. I think it's really important that you keep your parents' values in mind. But I think also your responsibility is now you begin to make decisions in your best interest, and maybe some of those values are a little bit different. So you have respect for your parents' values, but you also realize that now you've inherited this money, or you've inherited a stream of income if they've left you some kind of a stream of income in a trust. And what's your responsibility? What do? You need to have your own financial plan. This might be a life-changing event for you where all of a sudden your whole financial situation changes. If you're married and this money is in a trust, how do you deal with that? We hate to talk about a potential divorce situation or a potential remarriage situation, but that might be something that your parents planned for. If they didn't plan for it, maybe you need to start thinking about that type of thing. So you really need to sit down with a financial planner or a firm where you have a team of financial planners, especially if the amount of money is significant or the amount of assets are significant, and you need to walk through a full financial plan that doesn't just cover how to invest the money. It needs to now all of a sudden become your estate plan and figure out the contingencies that sometimes we don't like to think about. You know, maybe a child that has problems that you want to protect against their own behavior. Maybe you have a situation where, you know, your marriage is a little uncertain and so on, things that we don't like to talk about, but it's important that you understand that now that you've inherited these assets, you've got to deal with those things. So some difficult subjects to talk about here, but again, overall, we're talking about a situation where, you know, it's a positive situation. If you have this situation where your parents are going to leave you assets, or where you've inherited assets and you have a responsibility, have these hard conversations. Those of you that are parents, have the conversations with your kids. Those of you that are kids, ask the difficult questions. Really, really important stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today for this segment. Remember, you can get more information from all of our other resources, but the most important thing you can do, if you haven't done this, is hit the subscribe button. It helps us out and it will help you out. And hit the bell icon to get the notifications for all our retirement videos. Again, this is Joel Johnson with Johnson Brunetti. Thanks for joining us today.